I've been in tech for a long time, so I'm a tech person by trade since the 90s. I worked on internet technologies since then until now. And when Bitcoin came along, it wasn't some big mystery to me. It didn't take me months to figure it out. It took minutes because we realized that Bitcoin is just an extension of the internet. So I want to get into a few things here in terms of why I have deep understanding. My deep understanding, I want to share that with you, and I want to share why I have deep conviction as to why Bitcoin has value, where it's going, and then we can get into the market stuff sort of at the end. And if there's questions, certainly happy to answer any questions. So I've spent a lot of time. I've done Bitcoin mining, on my computer. I built up Bitcoin mines. I've done crypto investigations. I worked with law enforcement regulators around the world. Reached out to people in the start of BIGG, and we've gone through all of that journey, and now we're on to the next phase. So a couple of slides here will be a little bit technical, but I'll just work through them. And I think it's really important because one of the reasons I have deep conviction for Bitcoin is because I come at it from a technology standpoint. I try to break down what it actually is. And so when I give lectures and talks, I get out there and I like to ask the one basic question: what is Bitcoin? Like, what is it actually when we're looking at it? Why does it have deep value that people don't understand yet? And you're not going to understand that unless you're working in the industry. So when we look at Bitcoin, we don't look at it as money. I would ask the question, what is Bitcoin? People that go, it's money, it's a value transfer, value network, etc. Ultimately, yes, it's used for those things, but at its core, it is a trust protocol of the internet, represents an extension of the internet itself, which means, and it's a protocol, just like TCP/IP, the communication protocol of the internet as we know it. And we had emails, this massive first use case, and all the other things that have flown through it. Now we have the ability to do trust online, and we've extended the capabilities of the internet. So when I look at my career, I remember all the same things for the internet. People, it's full of hackers and crackers, and banks didn't want to deal with you because it was, this terrible thing. And we like the underlying technology of the internet, but the internet scares us. We like the underlying technology of Bitcoin blockchain, but Bitcoin scares us. Same kind of concepts. And eventually, they came full circle and realized it's this open architecture network, this open network, and this TCP/IP protocol is extremely powerful, has last mile reach, and it's effectively changed the world as we know it. Back in 98, 99, we estimated that the internet was worth $180 billion. And fast forward, Google goes public in 2004. We look at the internet, and we think it's worth about 3 trillion. By 2010, it's worth 20 trillion. And now the internet is worth an infallible number, and it's in every aspect of our lives. And so when you start to think of Bitcoin not as money, but as trust and an extension of the internet, you can understand why you're buying it, why you're holding it, why it becomes this thing over the next number of years here, where the value is beginning to unlock in a major way. So from a technology standpoint, on the left, this is the technology layers that make up the internet as we are using right this moment, all the way from the physical jack in the wall to the applications that run on top of it and everything in between. And they call this the 7-layer OSI stack. It stands for a big, long technology name, but what it represents is the plumbing of the internet, the literal plumbing of the internet. Bitcoin comes in there and adds to the plumbing of the internet. It adds the trust layer. It allows for payment and timestamps or anything digitized that requires trust. And so its value is becoming to be unlocked when we think about it from that perspective. And it's now hitting a major inflection point in terms of its usage. So another reason I look at the tech trends is I have a deep understanding of tech trends itself. And so when you have major protocols like the internet and computers, they only come around once every 20 years. And within that pace, you have major companies being built. So processors came out in 71. In 69, 71, and during that time, Apple and Microsoft were founded, and then 20 years later, the web is born. And during that time, you have Google and Facebook and the other monsters of today, and almost 20 years to that time from the first founding of the internet protocol, you have the next layer of the web, which is Bitcoin being founded. And now we're 10 years, 12 years from that point, and the giants of tomorrow are here, and are gonna come out the other side of it. So this is important because you only have these opportunities where you have major network effects, and effectively, it's a second chance to invest in the growth of the internet itself. One of the things that makes it very powerful is in our industry, it's called open architecture. Open architecture is this weird thing where Nobody really runs it. It's kind of headless. And once it hits an inflection point, it becomes very difficult to stop. So Linux operating system, great example. Back in the 90s, it was produced, and it basically forced IBM to change their entire business and drop their operating service division and run Linux after a number of years once it hit an inflection point. The internet itself, absolutely open architecture, represents, and once it hit an inflection point, impossible to stop. And why would you want to stop it? Because it's 10x, 100x better than anything else we've ever had before. And then Bitcoin fits in there. It's pure open architecture where anyone can use it. Anyone can hop on. It's last mile solution to around the world. And it's solving problems as it extends the internet. So I'll stop there in case there's questions. Otherwise, I'll just get on to the next slide. But I wanted to go back over these things because these are some of the things you will not know unless you're in the industry that underpins the value and the reasoning for Bitcoin. It's not just if enough people believe in it or if it, yada, yada, all those ridiculous statements. There's actual underlying value to the protocol itself. So the evolution of Bitcoin, kind of where it's at, the Lindy effect, I like this one to look at in terms of, Bitcoin's been out there a while. It's become established. The longer a brand is established, the more trust we have in it, the more users we have in it, and it gets that inflection point over time. Now, whether every single line item here is exactly what will happen, we don't know. But what we do know is that its usage for trust and payments and money over time is continuing to accelerate around the world, and it's accelerating in countries outside of North America and our bubble, and it's actually and working its way back in as we effectively change the way that the internet itself is going to work. All right, so last text slide here. What is Bitcoin's iPhone moment? The iPhone moment refers to the internet when people were like still in disbelief. Oh, the internet's dead. It's not going to work. All the ridiculous articles we read over time that obviously we look back and laugh at. And the iPhone came along in 2006 and made the internet really, really functional because you could suddenly get it on your phone and people were like, wow, this internet's it's really cool. So it reached that critical point where the general masses were using it. For Bitcoin, this represents the Bitcoin Lightning Network. So the Lightning Network takes Bitcoin and allows it to go from its current 7 transactions a second, which is very secure, but very relatively slow, but extremely safe, and allows it to scale into the millions of transactions and changes it into a true open payment architecture using layers of technology scaled on top of itself. And we have other things coming in there, such as Taro later this year, which will allow you to send and receive any kind of digitized asset effectively through the Lightning Network at massive scale. And so why is this important? So if you've been in the internet a long time, like myself, since the 90s, you've all seen these status codes. You go to a website and you see a status code, page not found, error code 404. We've all seen that from time to time. These are called status codes, and they're built into the internet itself as standards. So the web browsers use them as standards. It's built into web servers as standards. What is important though, is there's a status code called 402, which has never been used before. It was designed for micropayments on a global scale, and it was just simply waiting for a network that could actually be embedded into the browser and have a extension of the internet itself. And we now have that with the Lightning Network, Bitcoin itself. And so this is going to be something really, really special as this protocol, in my opinion, will be used finally. The status code will actually be used and will be embedded as a native payment rail to the internet at incredible, massive scale. And everyone will be forced to use it because it literally is an extension of the internet itself. Okay, so catch my breath here. This is some of the things that I look at and my understanding from based upon my career and way I look at it, not the other approach. Last slide. Lightning Network growing extremely fast. LQwD, we run Lightning Network nodes all over the world, and we've already seen over the last 3 months here just a quick uptick in all the transactions that we're starting to forward, and a lot of people on it. So we'll continue to share our stats out publicly so people could follow our growth, and we'll be doing that over the next week. So where are we at right now in the industry? So we've got issues in the decentralized finance space, non-Bitcoin space. We've got lenders that have overextended themselves. Effectively, it's like 2008 for crypto in the sense of the Big Short. and a lot of companies that are just way too much leverage and debt that has been going out there. So there's been a lot of forced selling for Bitcoin as a reserve asset in the industry. It certainly brought it down, but it's actually been absorbed amazingly well. Certainly general market issues. And we know now we're at that point where typically when you hit bear market territory, the miners themselves are forced to sell. We know what their base price is for production, and the most efficient miners are the ones that continue to be profitable here. So we're right in that sweet spot where we're down significant valuations. The miners are at the point where they're having to sell a little bit. We've all seen the meltdown in the space. We've seen some like Celsius and other companies that are that have hit dire straits, but are in the process of being bailed out and rejigged. So indicators that I like and that I follow, what I followed for years, and how do I see this network? So I think one of the most simplest indicators is the pure Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index. And we saw last week in that sell off over last Saturday, Friday, where everything just went down to the lows. Extreme fear. I've seen this several times. I've seen Mt. Gox. I've seen 2008. I've seen a bunch of these, and it was the point where the fear was quite palpable with people who were not necessarily long-term holders or speculators, and those who some weren't, they were forced to sell. So this is one of the indicators I like. We've seen it hit the extreme low, and it's possible to retest it, but certainly we're getting close to that point where there's just a lot of the narrative in the marketplace has turned extremely negative to the point where it's ridiculous, because when you look at it, you say, well, this reminds me of when people were super negative on the internet because of past.com and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, the technology stuff just kept motoring forward. It doesn't care. Bitcoin is this morally agnostic trust protocol that doesn't care who you are, where you are, what you do. It just simply runs and works, and its value continues to get unlocked as you get more and more usage. So some of the other narratives that we're seeing now, so I'm starting to see this week, you start to see the bottom starting to form a little bit. Yes, it could retest, and maybe there's a little more shakeout to go, but I do feel like we're in this kind of 8 to 12 week period where the bottoms, it's forming, and I'm starting to dollar cost average in on certain things and to pick my spots. People will have to decide what they want to do for themselves, but that's my personal strategy. But certainly we're seeing minor capitulation. Interesting talking of Bank of America. And I find it very fascinating to see a lot of the JP Morgan helping restructure Celsius, or was it Goldman Sachs? One of them helping restructure, and they're getting involved in the space. And we know for a fact that the banks have wanted to get into the space for a while. At least some of them, they just simply need more regulatory clarity. And so that's some of the good things that will come out of this. Before I get there, now I do follow a couple of people on Twitter. But I only like a couple of chart guys because they're not rah-rah, they're really fundamental. And even when they say stuff I don't like, in terms of like Dave the Wave is a great guy. He's been around for a long time, and he always, he called the top, he's called the bottom, he's called a lot, and he sticks to his model, right or wrong, he sticks to his model. He's been uncannily accurate with his simple model, and he's not out there being super promotional. I like that. And it just kind of looks at the buying opportunities for over time, and others on the marketplace pointing out that there's a lot of money that's been moved to the sidelines. So there's certainly a lot of powder that's becoming dry for the next leg up, and fear is high, greed is low, etc. So, all right. And so future adoption, where is it all going to go? So this downtrend is certainly going to push and accelerate regulatory aspect. And that's actually good for institutions to get into the space. It's going to create a lot more clarity. We know traditional banks will get into the space, but they need that regulatory clarity. And we've actually worked with them and other regulators through my other company, Blockchain Intelligence Group, providing analytics and all the compliance stuff, which is why a lot of exchanges in Canada and other places have been able to get licensed. But certainly the banks are held at a higher standard. But it's very interesting that they're soaking it right now. I do see a spot price ETF coming, and I think it'll be a major driver of price because it'll unlock opportunity. I don't know why they haven't had it yet, but there's definitely stuff that will accelerate it. And of interesting note, the Bitcoin halving narrative is starting to come up, and it will come up. So for those of you who don't know, that every 4 years, roughly 200,000 blocks that are processed on the Bitcoin network, which is roughly about 4 years. The reward rate for the miners who help process these blocks is cut in half. And so we're almost coming to that halfway point. And we tend to find that the drumbeat narrative kicks in about 1.5 years ahead of it. And people will start to lead up into it. So I think later this year, you can start to hear a lot more of it. And people are going to, and certainly as we tick into next year, that drumbeat is going to get louder, and that's going to talk about supply shock and all of those different things. So that's just on the future adoption. The stuff I didn't put on here is we're certainly seeing a lot of uptick in developing nations. And just on the network itself, where we're seeing the trends grow just off of the network that we run around the globe in terms of payment and usage and adoption around the world in terms of the network. All right, I'll stop there because that's the end of this slide here. But I'll open the floor to any questions if anybody